Welcome to the Business Bravery podcast, inspiring stories from coaches and course creators to help you do the next brave thing in your business. Coming up on the Business Bravery podcast, I'm your host, Tiffany Gilliland, an Australian business and mindset coach with 10 years experience in online marketing and the creator of the Business Bravery framework. I help coaches like you to be brave so you can stop dreaming and start doing that next big brave step and finally make more impact and get more clients. From speaking on camera to selling to launching, my approach to bravery helps you take bigger leaps without the mindset spirals. It's the secret ingredient to bigger results. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Meghan Lamle, who is a seasoned marketing, sales, and business expert who shared her remarkable journey from launching her online business in 2019 to achieving nearly $1 million in sales. We delved into her extensive background in sales, and she shared amazing insights into sales psychology and the buyer's mindset. Meghan also shares about finding balance in entrepreneurship and her plans to move away from evergreen launches in her pursuit of the 7-figure sales goal. With that said, this is an amazing episode, and I can't wait to share with you Meghan's stories of business bravery, past, present, and future. Now, who's ready for some business bravery inspiration? Let's dive in. Hi everyone, I am here with the amazing Meghan Lamle, and I'm very excited to have her on the podcast. She is someone who I have been following for quite some time before we even talked about her coming on the podcast. I'm addicted to her broadcast channel on Instagram, and I just really love her stuff and have attended one of her masterclasses. And even though I've been in online marketing for 10 years, there was stuff that I was writing down going, oh, I haven't heard this before. So I'm very excited to get talking to Meghan. So hi, Meghan. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about your business in your words so that I don't muck it up, and tell us what brave things you're working on in your business at the moment.
Hi, those are big shoes to fill. So my name is Meghan Lamle. I am a marketing, sales, and business expert. I have been in the online space since 2019. And in 2017, I actually graduated with my bachelor's in business management. And I had been in sales for about 4 years. And so I decided in 2019 that after doing a management job, hating it, realizing I didn't want to be away from my family, that I was going to start my business online. And so I took $200, invested it in a coaching program. And that was 4 years ago, actually, which is crazy. And since then, I have scaled my own business to almost $1 million in sales. We're getting pretty close in lifetime sales. And I have been able to teach entrepreneurs marketing and sales in a way that makes sense. And that is rooted in consumer behavior, sales psychology, and buyer psychology. So some really cool stuff that we do. I kind of act like a coaching educator role. So I have opportunities where I come in and I teach. And I actually have a free community that I teach in a lot because I'm a teacher at heart. And then getting alongside with entrepreneurs working on launch campaigns, emails. We are actually launching a blog and learning how to do that. And so that has been kind of the thing. Some brave things that I'm working on in my business. As I mentioned in pre-roll, I am getting back into blogging, which it doesn't seem like when you get in the online space bubble, you're like, oh, blogging, it doesn't seem that hard, but I actually have a dream of writing and publishing books. And I was recently with a friend who worked in the publishing industry, and she was like, if you want to write books, you need to write long form. And so that's been the first piece. And for me, writing has always been an interesting journey because I actually have something called dysgraphia. And dysgraphia is like dyslexia, but instead of me having a hard time reading, which y'all can't see it, but I have a ton of books behind me, I read all the time. I actually, when I'm writing, I leave words out. And so that is like the first piece. And then I think kind of this next brave thing is we are in a season of growing the business and going after that 7-figure cash revenue goal next year. And so really showing up to the plate and doing that because, a lot of people don't realize this. I'm only 28 years old. And the crazy part about that is most 28-year-olds don't run an online business, don't have a larger audience on Instagram. They also don't look at ways to grow it. And they're also not heading towards this 7-figure cash goal. So that's kind of what we're working on. My heart is not like fully set on if we don't make 7 figures next year, I'm not going to die, but I think there is a good contendership for it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And it's interesting what you say about like most 28-year-olds don't have an online following and things like that. I've been in this online marketing space for so long. My whole like life is so skewed that I feel like everybody else is doing it. Because I don't hang out with people who have 9 to 5 jobs anymore. Excuse me. And yeah, it's just so interesting, that perspective of how, I feel like everybody else is doing it and I'm behind and I need to catch up, even though I'm nowhere near 28 anymore. So yeah, very interesting, that perspective. There was another question that I wanted to ask. Oh, yes, this was my question. So for next year, for the getting to 7 figures, what things are you changing, if you don't mind, or like what shifts are you having to make, either like in the real world and also maybe mentally, like what's going on there, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, no, this is a great question. This is something that I have been thinking about long and hard about. So I think starting with the business specifically, I have been in this like evergreen launch cycle for 2 years. And I just decided, I was like, I don't love evergreen. I maybe be the only person in the online coaching space right now, but like I miss launching. I
Mm,
miss having to launch. I miss ramping it up. So that's like the first piece of it. And that kind of contributes to my life of, having rest periods before, once we get out of the launch, when we're pre-launching for something else. Because when you're going through a pre-launch phase, you don't have to be as visible as going through a launch phase. But when you're an evergreen, you have to be visible all the time. And part of that was starting just to wear on me mentally. I think evergreen is really good for some people, but I was like, I would like times when we are in a full sales mode, and I would like times where I am hanging out in my office and writing SEO. I think mentally, a lot of my biggest things over the last couple of years is one, getting over imposter syndrome. I talked about this on another interview, but for somebody who has done so much in such a short amount of time, I never realized how much imposter syndrome I had. And it was rooted really deeply subconsciously. And so I've been working through that and working with a hypnotherapist to kind of start unpacking that,
mm,
but also just giving myself lots of space to explore, to rest, to read. I think when people think about these massive revenue goals and like chasing these revenue goals, you think like, oh, you should be working more. You should be going balls to the wall. You should be like doing everything. And for me, we mapped it out in a way that makes sense. And like the numbers on paper, it feels so easy when I looked at like, we're going to have 3 signature programs. We didn't include the membership in this. The membership is just overflow. It's kind of still, it's a passion project, but a very good passion project. And it was like, okay, we have everything mapped out. We have all the launches mapped out. We're using Instagram and email like that. And it was like, okay, my biggest priority next year is going to be, how can I keep the momentum? Where can I rest? And then how can I have space? Because that was something that I was craving as I was getting out of evergreen sales, of like, I want to have periods where I'm on and I'm off, but I also just want to have time where it's like I'm learning things and I'm consuming, and I'm not as much on social media. Nothing wrong with social media, but taking time to really refine it, because I also am coming into my 10th year of sales. And so looking at, this incredible sales career I've had as, this 19-year-old kid who walked into a t-shirt shop and was like, give me a job, to now teaching, hundreds of people how to sell, even having a client do a multiple 6-figure launch, or having people, I had one client in my first calendar year did 6 figures in sales in 6 months. And it's been this incredible season, but it's kind of like I want to take some time to relish in it.
mm. Yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, before I moved into the Bravery thing, in fact, the way the Bravery thing came about was because I was helping people with launches. And then I kind of got a little bit burnt out, because it wasn't just doing my own launches. When I was helping my clients, whether I was coaching or whether I was doing services for them, I was just really in it, like just emotionally and energy wise. And yeah, it was kind of like, I'd be helping somebody launch, and then the very next week I'd be helping somebody else launch. And then it just, yeah, I can just appreciate, although I know you said like for you for the evergreen, but it's just like having the on and the off times. And yeah, I can just sort of appreciate that sort of change. And because I too am looking for spaciousness in my business as well. Yeah, but then I got a bit burnt out on that hamster wheel of on and off. In my evergreen, I still have on and off, but it's not quite the same as I'm in launch mode. It's kind of like I'm promoting at the moment, and then I can take a step back when I need to stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that I was thinking about a lot coming into quarter 4 is being content.
Mm.
I think there's bravery in moments of starting an online business. When I started my online business, I had about 600 followers on my personal account and I had about 200 on my business account. And it wasn't actually a business account. It was like Finsta turned business account, actually. So it's come a long way. The brave thing was showing up and building this business and building myself up. And, over the last couple of years, I've really taken an opportunity to be vulnerable with my audience. In 2021, I had an engagement break off and he was very much in my content. He was very around in me having to publicly come out one day and be like, hey, this isn't happening anymore. We're not engaged. And even now, my current partner, I don't really showcase him on social media because he doesn't want to be on social media. And in that same year, the brave thing was, as I was going through mental health, is really deciding that in that moment, I needed to walk away from being a business owner and take 5 months off and take another job and figure it out. But there's always these moments of striving in business. And I think a lot of people, you have the bravery of doing something new and putting yourself out there, but it's also brave to say, okay, with the season that I'm in or in the life that I'm in or moving into a new season that I'm in, where can I find ease? Where can I find being content? What can I find that works best for me and my business when it comes to sales, marketing, how I show up? And even sometimes I think we get so stuck in like, we have to do it now. We have to do it this year. We have to have to. But then it's like, it comes back to a lot of my age. Being 28, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm almost to 30. And people who are over 30, they're like, it's going to be great, Megan. And I'm like, let's go. My 20s was terrible. But it's also like thinking about long term. And I think that also comes from I read a lot of John Maxwell, and he's really taken his whole journey of becoming this pastor in a small town in Indiana and turning into this household name. And it's funny because, in the online space, we get hung up in that year. But when I listen to someone like John Maxwell, he talks about how he's been doing work 25 years ago, or these books he wrote. Like this one book I read, the first round that he wrote it was the year that I was born. And to me, it's so funny, right? But it's also like, a lot of times we get so hung up in the day to day, the month to month, that we forget that, this is a lifelong career for me if I want it to be. And
Yeah.
that there's a lot of opportunity to think, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road versus just like, what can I want in this season right now? And how fast can I run towards it? And then realize, maybe I don't need to like sprint mode all the time.
Yeah. Oh man, my own experiences too. Like for a long time, I thought sprint mode, just trying to get everything up and running in my business. And then I thought, oh yeah, I can slow down once I get to a certain point. The problem was I was miserable. I didn't have balance. I wasn't hanging out with friends, making enough time for family, my husband wanted to hang out and I'd be like, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And then 2 hours later, I'd still be working and things like that. Right. And yeah, I kind of realized I was like, yeah, this is more for me. My perception is it's more of a marathon than a sprint. And it's like, if when you look at it like that, it's like, then it's like you need to have, like, I needed to have that balance and also like that slowing down. And then I made more money, ironically, because I wasn't like, completely burnt out on working all of these hours and things like that. And I think maybe that's a cycle that maybe we all have to go through. I think, do you think so? It's like, I think part of you get into this stage in business where it's like, yeah, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to commit, I'm going to do all the things. And then it's like, then you get to a point where it's like, this isn't sustainable anymore. I need to slow down. Do you think that?
I think it's a cycle of business. And I think it's also
Mm.
just this cycle we've been in the world too. I came into business. When did you start? Like in online? I don't think
Oh,
we've ever talked about it.
okay. So I started in online marketing in 2011. But I
Okay.
didn't start building starting to do business stuff on the side. Like I flirted with it and whatever in 2015, 2016, 2017, started to get a bit more serious and really try things. And then from there, it's kind of been growing since 2017. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
didn't
I
go
feel like
full time until 2021. Yeah.
Yeah, because I came in 2019. I came in 6 months before the pandemic. And I think
Mm.
that it's a cycle, but I also think like a global pandemic it's been a blessing because there was opportunity for us to slow down and to build these incredible businesses and to have these connections. But I think a lot of people coming out of the pandemic really realized like what is the priority in life. And for me, I was thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking about, I was happiest when I wasn't trying to work weekends and trying to do this and bringing my laptop to bed and stuff. Cause my partner too, he works a normal 9 to 5. And so he's done. And I'm like trying to squeeze this last thing in. And I was like, what is the importance here? I think there's just a lot of business owners too who are starting to realize that like, I feel like we overestimate how much we can do in 1 year and underestimate how much we can do in 5 years, and how you can really like laying the foundations for it when it comes to sales and marketing. And that's kind of my experience. I've talked to a lot of my friends too, and they're starting to get in that phase where they're like, how much money is enough? Like, at what point are you making enough money that like anything else is overflow, and making more money is great. I never want people to be like, oh, I don't want to make more money. Like, that is not a situation I ever want people to be in. But it's like you said, instead of saying, I'm going to do this when I hit this milestone and the goalpost is always moving, it's like, how can you be happy in the season, work towards these things as you're growing? Because it's also like, if I look back 4 years ago, like Megan in 2019, can't imagine getting on podcasts, writing blogs. It's funny because I bought my podcast mic because I was going to start a podcast. That was my first thing I was going to do. And I'm using this mic today, but it was also like, she had no clue what was like possible and capable. And so also operating under that understanding, it's like, do what I can, but like, I also don't know where I'm going to be, in 5 more years. Where's the world going to be in 5 more years? What does the online space look like in 5 years?
Mm. Yeah, I struggle with that too. And I mean, for a long time, I would get stuck in the idea that things change so quickly, then kind of like in some ways, what's the point of planning out 5 years? Because this whole digital space is going to look completely differently. Like if you think about what was in popular 5 years ago, I mean, still there's foundations. There's always those foundations to cover. But yeah, but by the same token, now I'm actually trying to learn to actually get through that negative thinking or that limiting belief for me, I think, and really actually start to plan out longer term, just because me trying to do everything at the last minute is definitely hampering my growth, my ability to sell, and my like having the energy to sell when I need it, as opposed to being strung out. So yeah, stuff that I'm working on. Yeah.
I think that segues perfectly into like, we have trends in sales, and we also have like evergreen sales. We have things, and when I say evergreen, I'm not meaning like the process of it. I'm meaning like things that are evergreen, that they are unchanging, they are principles. And I had the same experience. And then I was sitting at Starbucks 2 weeks ago. I had I'm an iPad girly. I am a millennial to my core. I am like, if I could wear an Apple t-shirt, I would. And I was sitting there and I just screenshotted a year view of the next couple of years. And I was just highlighting, I'm like, I want to work on launching 3 programs over the next 3 years and revisit that, go into a refinement phase. Because the thing is like, social media is definitely going to change. Are we going to be on Instagram in 3 years? Who freaking knows? Who knows what we're going to be doing? And those things are going to be changing: the marketing, the trends, video marketing, audio marketing, blogging. But the other thing is there are things that, we have a lot of longevity in. I do believe websites, blogging, email is not going away anytime soon.
I know.
Podcast.
How many times have people tried to say email is dead? And it's like, nope, it's still here.
Email is alive and well. If we're the first person to tell you, podcasts have a lot of opportunity over the next 5 years. Audio marketing is just getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, I can't control how fast the world changes. I can't control what software comes out. If you would have told me in 2022, something like Threads would have came out after I dominated Twitter in 2010, I would have been like, what? What is this? But I can rest in the things that are unchanging. There are always people who are starting businesses who need to learn business foundations. I teach a program on that. There are always people who are needing to learn sales. There are always entrepreneurs who they hit their 5K months and they want to hit 10K. And while people say money wins are going out of style, I was talking to a local business owner and she actually just hit $10,000 in her local, like in-person business. And I was like, wow. I was like, that took you a while. I didn't say this out loud because I didn't want to be rude, where I was like, I did that like in 8 months of my online business because we don't have overhead. And there's always going to be people who they graduate from Scale to 5K. They want to spend more time. They want deeper connections with me. And I was like, okay, mission income, a 3-month mini mind. I was like, I could sell a 3-month mini mind with forks in my eyes. And I was like, for me, going back, and this is also a Brave thing, it kind of ties into what we're talking about. I was like, I haven't had a 6-month mastermind since 2020 because I am terrified of mastermind launches. I could launch Scale to 5K from a hospital bed. I could be, not that I'm pregnant, but I could be pregnant pushing out a baby being like, join Scale to 5K. But for
Scale to 5K, is that your 3-month?
It's 6 months now. So
okay.
It's a 6-month. For those of you who don't know, it's a 6-month program, basically taking you from if you're making $0 or $2,000 a month to $5,000 a month. And it's group coaching. It's paired with a course, but it's not like these mega courses that people have. Like, we keep videos under 20 minutes and then we do 3 group calls a month. It honestly is like, you start a business, come join the party and don't get burnt out and try to do all the things. And it's been my literal baby for so many years. And then the mini mind is now 3 months. And that's more of like coaching. That's more of like, let's get nitty gritty in your business. Let's get side by side. The girls who are in it right now, like one, she had a discovery call yesterday. And I was like, hey, do you have a script? Do you have a process to go through this? And she's like, no. And I was like, here's a script. Another one is she's actually a copywriter and she has like a lot of educational background. And so she is going through this launch. And I was like, hey, send me your content. Let's look it over. Let's refine it. So that ties into, I haven't had a 6-month mastermind in forever. I've tried to launch it 2 different times and it's just been like, I just didn't get the time it wanted to. And when I sat down, I was like, I need to just do this. I was like, I need to put my big girl panties on and just launch this freaking mastermind in 2024, because I've also been talking about it for 6 months that I was going to launch a mastermind in 2024. And I don't want to show up and be like, surprise, I don't want to do it. But those are the things too. It's like the marketing may change, but how we sell things hasn't changed. And it doesn't change as much as people think. There's always a problem that somebody has. There's always somebody who gives them a solution. And how we talk about our offers, I think, are actually going to get easier because we know more about the consumer and their brain and how they're buying. People are always going to have questions and you're always going to have to pre-qualify someone. It's just whatever tactic we're using, that's where it changes. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and plan the next 3 years. Some of my friends were like, yeah, I got a 5-year plan. Let's go. Some people were like, things are going to change so much. And I'm like, but I can always work towards this goal. I can always work towards these things and, review year to year.
Yeah. I love that you're planning that stuff out. And I just wanted to ask, so for you, like, what's the difference between your 6-month program and a 6-month mastermind? Like, for you, what's the thing that makes the 6-month mastermind the thing that's not easy for you to sell, or, it just doesn't, like, there's something in your mind about it's bigger, or, like, if you don't mind me asking.
No, you can ask anything. I'm an open book on a podcast. My first mastermind launch was an anomaly that I thought. What I did, basically what happened is I launched it off the tail end of Scale to 5K with a round that did really well. I had a bunch of intensive clients and one-on-one clients, funneled it in, did an amazing launch. I have showed up to the other launches with the same expectation, but without the same kind of support, right? And so for me, where it gets really frustrated is, one, it is a significantly higher investment. And with a mastermind, we're typically working a lot closer. But the other thing is I've been showing up to these launches, and when it didn't pan out in a week and a half like I thought it would, I was like, this isn't working. Like, I'm just not a mastermind girly, right? And that's where part of me, I took a step back with this last launch where it didn't go my way, but it wasn't a total fail. I don't think of things of like pass and fail anymore. And I was like, what about that launch made it really easy? And I was like, I literally had probably 25 clients to pre-invite for 12 spots before I ever took to social media. And I was like, I haven't had that same opportunity because I haven't been doing the same volume with intensives and one-on-one like I did in 2020. And I was like, be sitting here. I'm like, Meghan to Meghan, right? I'm like, no wonder you feel frustrated. It's because you're not in the same conditions, but you're treating the launches the same. And so that was where it was like, okay, I want to go back to launching because I want to have time to play with my audience and have fun with them. And, you know, my favorite part of a launch is pre-launch. When I know something that y'all don't know and I get to drip it out to you and I get to get the hypey and the launch day comes, like that has always been my favorite part. And that's where it was like, this doesn't feel as scary anymore because I can set myself up, and I have set myself up really well, you know, even though it's, you know, November, December, January, February, 4 months out, right? Before we even start getting into pre-launch. But the other part is it was like, am I worthy about spending this money? Can I do this type of launch? You know, are people going to pay this? It's these normal thoughts that we have as entrepreneurs. And I was like, it's not a silly thought, but part of this was like, I've had people pay me more before. And it's just, you know, there's always that mental edge that I think a lot of people forget about. When you come from a sales background, you are hammered with this idea that you're only as good as your last sale or your last high month. Oh, it's a mind roller coaster, let me tell you. But when you get into something like entrepreneurship, it's like, no, you're still good. It's just conditions have changed. You know, you have a different audience. The people who were in that mastermind 3 years ago, some of them aren't even in business anymore. Like things change. And that's where it's like, okay, instead of me just being like, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to have a mastermind, this is too hard. That's where I came to the conclusion where I was like, I need a good time for pre-launch. I need time where I'm not selling something, nurturing my audience, spending a lot of time with them, and then having an opportunity to have a traditional launch.
Yeah. It's definitely the power of that runway and all that stuff too has such an impact on the results in a launch for sure. So question then, like, does your mastermind, like, what makes it something that you need to launch as opposed to maybe just invite past clients and maybe have it as like that follow on from after they've done the scale to 5K or something? How does that work for you, if you don't mind me? Just like
I thought about
all the nosy questions, just because I'm going through something like this, trying to launch a group program, doing the exact same things where it's like, I want to do like a group program, but I'm also sabotaging the launches. If it's not working in a week, then I'm not in it properly. And so that's why I'm asking.
So for me, I haven't had enough volume go through scale to 5K over the last couple of years where we had, you know, 20 some people each round where we've had smaller volume. It's also scale to 5K has gone through a couple evolutions where it originally was a group program and then it was like a little mini mind and we had one-on-one calls and I was like, this is not scalable for me. And so that's where Mission Income got inserted, is because someone who comes off of scale to 5K was 3 months, but I just made it 6 months because I was like, people need more time now. Coming off of that, they may not be ready for another 6-month commitment heading in a bigger direction. And I was like, okay, because what I'm also noticing with coaching is a lot of people they're getting a lot of coaching and they want to go into an implementation period. And I'm like, let's go into implementation, but let's do this together so that you continue your momentum. Because I notice a lot of people in implementation periods, they just kind of like, and then they're not actually doing anything because they're overwhelmed. And so what I was like, there was a gap in my suite and I was like, I need people to get, you know, they need to be still getting coached, but not really learning anything, really going through refinement and really going through this stuff before getting into another 6 to 12 month program. And so that's where I inserted another offer in it. And I was like, okay, for scale to 5K to do well, it just exists. I hold the trademark for it. I've been talking about it for years. And when we do launches with that, there's also a different feel, evergreen versus cohorts. When everybody starts together, there's a lot of energy. And then as they're going through the launches and they're signing clients, it's like the energy keeps building and going. And I was like, I missed that. Like, it's like school. It feels like a school year is what I compare it to, where it's like you get through like the slump and then you go through that. And I was like, that is a piece of that was really important, going back to cohort systems and having people go through stuff together and having them have that group experience, having that belonging. For me, it was a big gap to go from, okay, you know, you're paying 500, 750, maybe $1,000 a month, to jumping into a $2,500 mastermind. And so that was the other piece with it, where I noticed if they could have time to get coaching, have a little bit higher payment, but then have an opportunity to really blow up their income. Because like 5K is just the foundation in your business. It's like a tease. Once you make 5K months, you're like, oh, I can double, triple, quadruple this, right? And so that's where it was like that middle piece for mission income kind of fell into my lap, because I wanted to do a Q4 mastermind, because people ask for a mastermind and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll think about it. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh, I don't want to launch this. I'm terrified. And that's where it fell into place, because it was like, we don't have material in there. We don't have curriculum for you to consume. And maybe we will eventually. It was like, it's just straight coaching. And when I added that piece back in, I was like, oh, here is your ascension model that they teach you in the online space. You know, someone comes in, they do the membership, they realize scale to 5Ks for them, and they go through. But it also created this relationship that I was craving with my clients of, you know, I had one client I worked with for 2 years. I took her business from a $27 membership to, she works with whatever the equivalency of Fortune 500 in England is. And I watched her grow this business, employ her sister. You know, she had a second business that was already good to go. And I was like, I want more time with people. And I want them to have an opportunity, if there isn't a ton of curriculum, you know, at Mission Income and even at the mastermind level, if there's not a ton of curriculum, for people to keep re-signing just to be in this space. Because that was the thing that I also felt like was missing, is that the online space is very curriculum heavy, which I think is really powerful. But I also think that you get to a point in your business where it's not about learning a ton more about what you do. You know, I don't read a lot of sales books anymore. I like sales books, but as I'm reading them, I'm like, I know this. I've known this for years. It's like you have different assets and facets that you start going into, you know, leadership and leading a team, or how can I diversify my marketing? If you've only been on Instagram for 3 years, how can you expand out? You know, what emails are we doing? Do you want to start a blog and like have a presence in a blogging space? Do you want to have a YouTube? Like, that's where I feel like for me, there was that gap in my suite, and there was just an opportunity just to like coach and not be like, go watch the videos and come back. With group launches though, to kind of tie back to what you're saying about sabotaging, the consumer needs way more time than they did before. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting really stuck, where it's like what used to be a 6-week timeline could be a 12-week timeline for a new offer. But I also think that people are buying into these communities because they don't have people in their lives who are entrepreneurs to start with. You know, the person I related to most when I started my business was my best friend's dad, who owned this like archery company. But like, he was the small business owner in my life. And that's where I think a lot of people, you know, we've been siloed so much over the last couple of years. It's like they're getting in these communities. And I see it in Scale to 5K all the time. The ones who do the best are the ones who really, instead of latching on to me and being like, you are my person, I'm like, hey, I'm your coach, but I want you to treat me like your teacher. You know, you're not going to eat lunch with a teacher in high school. You maybe will in college, but these are your people. And so part of that, longer timelines, but also emphasizing, you know, you're getting in a community with other people. And that is one of the hardest and easiest lessons to learn as a business owner, because when you're winning, you get to share it with other people. But when you're not winning too, you get to come and show up and be like, hey, what are the solutions? But how can I also celebrate someone who is, you know, doing better than me in that moment? And I could be having the worst day of my life. And then learning that it is a spectrum when it comes to business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I also love the group, programs, because like sometimes somebody will ask a question in a group and it's like, it's something that I didn't even know was holding me back. And it was like, oh yeah, I do that too. Or I do that in this other area of my business, or somebody says, I'm going for this, like I have a podcast accountability group and someone's like, oh, I'm working on this goal. It's like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible, you know, like, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I'll go do that. So, yeah.
We learn a lot through modeling as humans, but we only learn to the edge of our capacity. And that was something I experienced in a mastermind group. I was in this mastermind and I was making around like $15,000 a month. And I was hot shit making $15,000 a month. This other coach was working on a $40,000 cash month. She launched an offer and had 22 industry leaders because of what she was launching. It was like, it's kind of like DEI, so diversity and inclusion, and mindfulness, mental health type situation. She was heading towards a 40K cash month. And like the person running the mastermind had just done like a multiple 6-figure launch. So I was like, yeah, you can do that. But to be sitting in a room with someone where it's like $40,000 was like more than my yearly salary as a manager.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. It's so powerful, especially when you get to a certain level, like, like I find in the online space, it's so easy to find all of this introduction, foundations, and every time you get into a course, it's like, oh, make sure you do these things. And it's like, look, I've been in 20 courses that have taught me this. Yeah, there's other things that I had to unravel that I didn't even know. And yet also just having the power of other people who are working at that higher level. Otherwise, yeah, you could end up just staying where you are because you don't have that help or that, what's the word, stuff to inspire you, that inspiration. That is the word.
I call it foresight with my clients, where it's like you see your path, and that can be kind of like you're in a tunnel and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But with like mentorship and coaching, and that's why it's so powerful, they're standing on the other side of the tunnel. And while you're in the thick of it, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know if this is going to pan out. But they're like, hey, on this other side, there's actually so much more. Kind of a visual I get is here in Colorado Springs, we have a place called Gold Camp Road, and it has a series of tunnels. It's haunted. You can't argue with me. It is 100% haunted. I will never go up there after dark. But as you're going through, there's a couple of tunnels. When you come out, there's this clearing, and it's this massive clearing. It's a beautiful view. And that's what I always think, in the tunnel, if you stopped in the tunnel, I would never do that because it's haunted. But if you stop in the tunnel, you're kind of in the thick of it. But when you come out, you see this clearing. And that's where I think a lot of people also struggle with entrepreneurship, is because, it's constantly told to come back to the basics. And I think we confuse basics with principles. I think there are things that you need to do, comparing it to working out. There are so many workouts that you need to do to get to a fitness level to hit your goal. But that doesn't mean you need to be learning how to do a sit-up every single week to do your sit-ups. Sometimes you just need to do your reps. And that's where I find a lot of entrepreneurs are getting stuck lately, is that reading intro to biz books. I really don't care if the next greatest thing writes a book about how to start an online business. I already started a business. I'm not going to read any more intro to biz books. I already know how to start that business. I think a lot of them also kind of stay in like foundational programs sometimes, because sometimes it's nice to invest from a place where it's like, oh, I'm like missing this foundational piece. And sometimes with entrepreneurs, you truly are missing ideal client, market research, offers. But sometimes it's not that you need to go back and like learn it with everybody else who is like, oh my gosh, ideal client. Sometimes it's just like, okay, how does ideal client apply when you're now selling multiple offers, or you are now, I get a lot of service providers who are also doing coaching and consulting, and how do you sell a done for you offer and a coaching offer without demonizing one or the other, right? And that's where I think there's also, a push and pull in a relationship. Every good mentor I've ever had has seen more potential in me than sometimes I can see in myself, which is crazy because I am like potential all day long, like wonder child and crazy things. But that's where it's also like how you view yourself and how you view your business. Sometimes you need somebody else to look at it and really get out and look at that. And that's what I love about sales is my clients come in, my client who did a multiple 6-figure launch, I remember we were talking about goals because I have everybody set goals and I'm like, okay, let's not get attached to it. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in the world. And I remember her being like, okay, I can only sign 10 people a cohort lately. So my base goal is going to be 10. And I'm like, okay. I like rolled my eyes because I was like, 10 is very small compared to the email list she had. And she had been doing this for 10 years and some crazy things. And I'm like, okay, so we'll make sure we get 10 in pre-launch walking into the launch.
Mm.
My client ended up with 70 plus people doing a over $200,000 launch, even with a downsell.
Mm.
And in that moment, she was like, it's crazy because the whole year prior, she'd been trying the things and it wasn't working out. But looking on the other end, I was like, this all makes sense for you because you're selling something that they know so well and they think that is going to be the next step for them and that they are really empowered and ready to buy. But when you're in that moment too, sometimes you can't see it. And that's where it's like sales and mentorship. It's like, I'm over here being like, let's look at the facts and let's look at the numbers because there's some crazy shit that's about to happen.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. That value of having somebody on the outside who can see things without, at least from my perspective, my own limiting beliefs or things like that, or my own abilities and things like that. Like, you know, for the longest time, like I didn't want to tell people how long I'd been in business and stuff, just because like my mindset has been the thing that has just held me back, and imposter syndrome, and just really feeling like, yeah, of course it's perfectly okay for everybody else and all my clients make more money than me and all that stuff, but you know, this isn't possible for me. Just like that was the track in my brain that I didn't even know was happening. And just that value of having somebody on the outside like you to like, yes, to look at the numbers and to look at what you should be doing, but also to just, hey, here's what's possible and I see that potential in you. It's so powerful.
Did you know that most businesses fail in their first 5 years? So if you can get to
Mm.
year 5, you're doing
Yeah.
better. And 50% of businesses will close their doors in the first year. And out of that 50%, 50 more will close their doors by year 5.
Mm.
Which 50% of 50 is 25%. So 75% of business owners,
Mm.
like if you take those numbers, will
Mm.
close in years 1 to 5. So if you can just get past the 2-year itch and the 5-year hope, you're doing a lot better. I think there's a lot of pressure in the online space for success to be a metric of sales. And what a lot of people aren't talking about is they have paid someone a lot of money to learn how to do sales. And there are some big names that have these kind of backdoor coaches that if you don't know about them, who they're coaching and what they do, you don't do some super sleuthing, you wouldn't know. You just see them pop up these like amazing numbers and you're like, why is my business not performing that? And then with that, a lot of it is to do with like marketing. And that's why I niched into sales. And for a long time, I was like, if you have bad marketing, I can teach you how to sell. Now you need both. And that's where a lot of my clients, they feel like there is a really big struggle in the space because your marketing has to be bringing people in, but then your sales is converting them.
Yeah.
But if your doors are still open after year 5, you're getting further than most people. That's the first thing to consider. And the second thing is that nobody's naturally good at sales. And so sometimes when you're comparing yourself, you have to like remove yourself and be like, have I had the opportunity to learn sales in the capacity that I needed to, or to have marketing in the capacity that I needed to? When I took time off from the online space, I went and worked for another coaching company and they had a large audience. So like we could do 100K in sales in a week because they had an audience of over 20,000 people.
Yeah.
So it's also like, you know, I think a lot of people think that there's something wrong with them. And when they take like a bigger picture, I'm like, there's actually nothing wrong with you. It's you don't have the skill yet, and everybody can learn sales. That's the cool part. I wasn't naturally good at sales. I can talk about the very many blunders I've had in my sales career, but also in business. And then it's also like, you know, there does need to be a priority of growing your audience and growing an engaged, loyal audience too, where I think in previous years we've kind of pushed it to the side.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me, I had my part-time day job, which was doing marketing for a nonprofit. And so like that marketing and awareness piece, like I was very good at that. And it didn't require sales, like it was a government nonprofit. So it didn't require sales. It didn't require, you know, people donating or anything like that. And yeah, and in my business for the longest time, I was like, well, I've got this day job, so I don't need to go get clients. I'll just rely on referrals. And so it didn't force me to build those sales skills, even though like I have done sales in the past, but never I couldn't handle the negative emotions of hearing the no's, and like I made it mean something about me and all those spirals. And that's the stuff I've been working on in the last 12, 18 months. And yeah, my business is going in a better direction now. So, yeah.
I could take a note all day long working a sales job. And I
Mm.
joke, I still know my regional manager, and I joke every once in a while. I'm like, hey, you want to, like, I'll come back for holiday season and like, I was good then, you should see me now type situation.
Yeah.
I think it's different though when it's you, your business, you're responsible for the marketing, you're responsible for the sales. It is a completely different ball field. And that's why I also tell my clients, I'm like, give yourself way more time to learn. Sales, a lot of people think sales is a pitch, it's a close, it's an objection handling, but it's, how you're talking about your offer, how you are marketing your offer, how you are showing up, how you are getting your audience to get attention. It's even, as I'm writing these blog posts, these are little pieces of sales that I'm layering in. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle too, is they think, oh, getting better at sales means I get better at pitching and closing. And I'm like, actually getting better at sales is lining yourself up so that when you close, you either A, kind of know how it's going to go. I never project objections, but I can kind of tell how someone's going to close or how they're going to kind of hang out. Or B, you're prepared for that. And that's where that moment when you get to the pitch doesn't really matter. You could blow your pitch and do all the legwork of the pre-qualification, having good marketing and having good rapport with them, and then stumble through your pitch and sign clients. It's just people get so hung up on perfecting the pitch that they forget that there's all this like legwork before it.
Yeah, I mean, because like if the legwork isn't there, then the best pitch can't overcome the lack of trust, or the lack of, I know you, I trust you. I know that know, like, and trust is such a cliche, but it's really the truth. Like that's been my experience. I mean, sometimes like I've been lucky and I've managed to build trust in a very short time with some people, but other times it's just, yeah, all pitches all day long, but they don't know me. So yeah.
There's no luck in business. That's what I have learned. There is no luck in business. There is preparation that feels like luck, but it does come down to, when you think about solutions, you don't call the person you like the most for a solution. You call the person you trust the most. And that's where I think a lot of people get hung up on sales, is they think that it's like sales actually has nothing to do with you. It has absolutely nothing to do with you and how capable and how credible you are. If you can't get that person on the other side to, one, believe in themselves, two, trust that whatever you are selling, and sales doesn't have to, it's not just our businesses. You could be selling your spouse on, a restaurant that you're going to, and why we should try this restaurant versus the restaurant we've gone to hundreds of times, and they always get our order right, and they know our name, and they know what table we go to, right? There's a lot of communication around that. If you can't get them to believe it, you can't get them to trust it, you probably can't get them to take action on that. And that's where a lot of times too, that's where your marketing plays into it. Where when you work a sales job or you work a marketing job, if you work a marketing job, you never see sales, because marketing's job is to bring people in, right? And if you work sales, you're not doing the marketing, they're just bringing the leads and you're closing it, you're building the trust. Business says, hey, you're both. And that's where I think I tell people, I'm like, you don't need to be the most likable person. You don't need to be the most outgoing and bubbly. Actually, there is no correlation to being outgoing and being good at sales. There is a correlation to being introverted and introspective and listening to people and being good at sales. The thing is, it also doesn't, I tell my clients this all the time. I'm like, it doesn't really matter what you say if you're asking the right questions and you're listening to them.
Yeah.
And when you take that pressure off of, you don't have to say the perfect thing. You just have to ask really good questions. And typically it's just 3 of them. You lead them to the answer and they trust you because they know you. Then that's where it gets easy. And that's where I've thrived with sales for such a long time, is because, I'm not like Matilda's dad. I'm not like buffing myself up and looking really good and making it. It's always, asking people, because most people have a decision before they go into sales. Most people, what I have learned is most people have awareness of me and what I've built, and they're deciding in that moment, is now the time to do it or later? Is this person for me or someone else? And there's nothing I can say that builds it up. It's, how do I listen to you? How do I ask you questions? I always use the example of when I went on my first date with my current partner. First of all, it was 3 hours long. I've never had a 3-hour first date. I'm like 30 minutes coffee, in and out, let's go, playing something afterwards type thing. And for him, I didn't. And I remember coming out of it and being like, wow, that was such a good first date. And my friends were like, well, what did you talk about? And I'm like, well, I talked the whole time. He didn't say anything because he's an introvert, but it was the way he looked at me. He would look me in the eyes and he would ask me questions. And that's how our whole relationship developed, is he would learn more about me. He would listen to my podcasts, and then he would ask me questions about things. And I was like, it wasn't what he was saying. I cannot tell you to this day what he said. I can tell you what he asked about. I can tell you, how he made me feel. And it was all questions. And that's the thing, when you remove that pressure of, I need to say this, it needs to go right, it needs to, and you're like, what questions do I need to ask? How can I make someone feel safe and secure in this? Sometimes we're spending thousands of dollars on the internet with people who we've never sat in a room with to get to this dream. And it's like, money's all digital, but it's still money. It's like, how can I make you feel safe? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to make an investment that doesn't feel safe. You're not going to go, the people who you like the most aren't the people who are going to buy from you. It's the people who trust you. I have a post coming out, and it's like, it's kind of bold, where it's like, I really don't care how much you like me. I care about how much you trust me to get you to the place that you want. Because sometimes, to be honest, in a coaching container, you may not like it if I give you a little bit tough love, or if there's if you're having, it's a relationship, you're having a thing, but it's like, do you trust that person? Because that's the most important piece of sales.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such good advice. And I'm making notes here.
You're like writing down a little mini coaching message.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's going to help me like do show notes and titles and things, but yes, I am actually making notes for myself, because every time I listen to you talking about sales, especially, I'm always like, oh yes, I need to remember that and do that and things like that. Yeah. I mean, some of the clients, like where I've had calls and like I haven't known them very well, but I just ask them questions about what they need and what they're looking for. And they're the ones who are like, yep, I want to buy straight away. And the ones where I'm more nervous and I don't ask as many questions, or I don't listen as much, or things like that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes like I can't click with the person or something like that. I had one recently where she wanted to only overcome all of her weaknesses to build her business. I was like, well, why wouldn't you create a business around your strengths? And yeah, like just see the look on her face. It wasn't this realization. It was just this, oh, you're completely wrong. You don't get me. And yeah, and it was just like, yep, that's how I knew we wouldn't have been a fit to work together anyway. But yeah, it's just, yeah. Anyway, good things that you're saying.
There's a lot of pride in business where we think it has to be this like upward struggle constantly. I like to compare it to, it's not Icarus. Icarus is the one who flew too close to the sun and his wings melted.
Sisyphus, the boulder and Sisyphus.
You're on my wavelength.
Know. That was my life. That was my life for too many decades. Like I said, 28 was a long time ago for me. So yeah.
Sisyphus is just pushing up a boulder, and every day rolls back down. He has to push it back up, rolls back down, push it back up. And that's how business can feel. And that's how sales can feel. And when I started in online space, I didn't really think about like, I'm going to be a sales girly. I was just like, my clients are doing some crazy things, like they're signing clients, they're booking out, they're doing this, and I'm like, okay, maybe I need to do this. And I remember having a conversation where I'm like, I'm really scared to like venture into this and do this. And that was, looking back, I'm like, it all makes sense, because it was like, I want sales to feel easy and fun and flowy, and you can be yourself, and I don't want you to feel like you're pushing the boulder uphill every day. Like, that is not business. Business can be easeful. There isn't a lack of effort. It's not, people are like, oh, it has to always be easy. No, there's time you put a lot of effort in, but it should always feel like it's compounding. It should always feel like it's working in your favor. You should feel like you have lucky girl syndrome, but there's no such thing as luck, because most of us prepare, right? And that's where it's like, I think a lot of people get hung up on that, and they're like, I need to master all my weaknesses and stuff. And it's like, build around your strengths, but understand there are foundations of business: marketing, sales, operations, finances. You need to know the fours. it would be nice if they were all like an F or like an M or something, make it really easy and catchy. But from there, business should be always highlighting you and highlighting your best part. And that was something that I've found a lot of opportunity in is, I've always talked. I started at 8 months and I've never shut up. That's why I got a podcast. But that's where it's also like, find those things you do really well at. And that's where you can highlight yourself and you can feel really confident. Because the other thing about humans, which is really interesting in sales, is we operate with this thing called the principle of self-disclosure. If you get someone to start talking about themselves, they get a little dopamine hit and they keep talking about themselves because they feel good because of that dopamine. And that's why I love sales, is because people get an opportunity. I always get the, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I word vomited on you. And I'm like, no, I'm just like taking notes and like listening to you. People want to talk about themselves and they want to feel good. And that's the really cool thing about what I do and what most of us do, is we get to teach people how to feel really good and how to control their life, basically.
Oof. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's so powerful, because I know like so many people are like, oh, sales is icky. And then sometimes I don't get it now because I've worked through it. But previously, if I'd get a no from someone, I'd be like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Oh, I need to change everything. And then I'd go into the next interaction feeling icky, even though, yeah. So just that's so powerful, that how can we make someone else feel good? I love that.
If you are someone who gets the RSD, the rejection sensitivity disorder, from no's, I challenge you to the 100 no's challenge, where basically you start going out. I mean, I'm not telling people to cold pitch. I modeled this a lot better. I probably need to do a podcast about it. Start pitching the people that you think, because once you hear no, the other thing is sometimes when you start asking for things, you start hearing yes. And when I originally did the 100 no's challenge, the problem is every time I do this challenge, I hear too many yeses instead of no's. The no's are still, I want you to keep tallies of the no's, but you get the yeses and you get the momentum, right? And that momentum continues to create more momentum, but it doesn't feel as much like an attack on you. When someone's saying no, they're just saying no to an opportunity. And that's where, a lot of people get really frustrated with it, but it's like, it has nothing to do with you. Just like, if someone walked up to you and was like, hey, can you do this for free? You'd be like, no. You're not making it about them either. And that's where sometimes I think people get really hung up. I always tell my clients, though, is not to get into a place where you need to have that one person you're pitching or that one person you're talking to say yes. Like, always give yourself options, because that's where a lot of people get really hung up, is that they start selling after they needed money, or they start looking for clients after they needed to sign clients. And that's where they're getting really stuck on, like, if this person says no, I have nobody else in the history of Instagram who have ever talked to me to say yes. And it's like, actually, if we broaden our horizons out, there's a lot more. And that's where it's like, have really good, sales is part feel good, but there are systems and structure in place to make it really easy and organized for you.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Yeah. So I want to say, like, thank you so much for all of your time on the podcast today. It has been amazing. I appreciate that. I have one kind of last quick question that I like to ask everybody at the end. And that is, like, for the person who's listening who wants to do the next brave thing in their business, whether that is going after a bigger income goal for next year, planning out longer, or even just focusing on their sales, maybe the 100 no's challenge, all of these good things that we've talked about, but they're kind of sort of stuck and they're not moving forward. They're not, or they're thinking now's not the right time, I'll sort that out next year. What advice would you give to them from your perspective?
There is this saying that goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. I live in that advice. Your next best time is always going to be in that moment. But there is something you can do psychologically. So my friend Addison coined this as breakthrough moves. If you are trying to do something different, do different things. And sometimes when you're in that stuckness, it's because 90% of what we think are the same thoughts. We do, as business owners, we do a lot more repetition than you realize. Something as simple as, like, are you right-handed? Brush your teeth with your left hand. If you always work out in the evening, work out in the morning. If you go to a workout class all the time, do that, because that new motion can breed new motion and then you can move in that direction. I recently did it where I'm not very good at brushing my teeth with my left hand. I'll give everybody an update. I feel like I have to go back and brush sometimes. I'm like 2 years old learning how to brush my teeth. I went to a spin class a couple weeks ago, almost died, but it was a great time. And this week, actually, I've been working at Starbucks, which I haven't done because I have my own personal office. Those little things can breed that change because we value safety above everything. And so if you're like, okay, I'm doing the things, I'm doing the breakout moves, and then I go to do this new thing, just also remind yourself that you're safe. I'm safe. I'm here. Because to get different, you have to do different, but the doing different is the hard part.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so true. Doing different is the hard part.
Try brushing your teeth. If you're a righty, try it with your left hand. Like, I was literally like, if this is my toothbrush, I'm holding up an expo marker for those of you. I was like gripping my toothbrush right here and I'm like, why isn't it working? And then I gave my right hand and I was like, oh, I hold the edge and do it this way. So now I'm like, but it's simple things like that change your brain. And that's where it's like, we value safety and repetition. And so it feels scary, but most of the time it isn't. And fear is a top-down experience. It starts in our brain and goes to our bodies. And so you can tell your brain, hey, I'm safe, and it can create that safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for all of your amazing insights. Like I said, I've been taking notes like always. Definitely things for me to focus on in the future. So thank you so much. Of course, there'll be links to all of your stuff in the show notes and all that stuff. But for those people who are like me and just like, oh, I want to go do it now while I'm inspired, how do people get in touch with you? Where's the best place to get in contact and follow and all that?
Slide in on Instagram. Until Instagram doesn't exist anymore, I will be there.
Well, I mean, Facebook still hasn't died, so I mean, I think Instagram will be there.
Facebook's about to do a resurgent. With Twitter going down, I think Facebook's about to do a resurgent, and I think they're going to dump a lot of money back into Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that coming too, actually, for sure. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Business Bravery podcast. Has this episode inspired you to do something brave? Even if it's only send a difficult email, please share it with me on Instagram or other social media channels. Feel free to tag me at Tiffany G Studios. That's TIFFANY. G for golf, STUDIOS, no spaces, no underscores, etc. Or you can use the hashtag Business Bravery Podcast so that I can cheer you on, and together we can inspire other coaches and course creators to do brave things in their business and life. Now, I'm Tiffany, and I'll leave you with this one last thing. What's one brave thing you're going to do today? It doesn't have to be big. Even the smallest steps can create the most massive results. So again, feel free to share it with me either publicly or privately so that I can cheer you on. That's it from me. Until next time, bye for now.